We are back with the 164th edition of the Quarantinecast. As always, I'm really excited for this one, but I'm very, very excited for this one because not only am I having a repeat guest on, I'm having someone who just arguably picked up one of their biggest wins of their career, and Rob Font, his head coach, Tyson Chartier. How you doing?
Doing good, man. Just getting back on that East Coast time zone. Still soaking up the after effects of no sleep for a couple of days. But yeah, man, good problems to have.
Yeah, it's been a long year of traveling, whether that's in a car or driving across the country or flying across the world. What's it like getting acclimated to all these different time zones and then having to get back out on the road again?
Yeah, it's tough, but you get like the kids at home that they're on a schedule, so you kind of if you want to see them, you got to get adjusted to the schedule right when you get back home. But this last one was kind of tough because we had obviously you don't go to bed really the night after the fight, and then we stayed in Vegas a little bit longer, took a red eye home, and I don't really sleep while I'm playing. So it was like 2 nights where I didn't sleep and the adrenaline dump, and it was tough. I was pretty screwed up for a couple of days, but yeah, generally it's like usually have someone else in camp, so you don't have a lot of time to just kind of recover. But right now, fortunately, everybody's kind of between fights. We got a few days here where Rob's licking his wounds, Calvin's traveling to Texas to see family, and kind of in a little bit of a holding pattern. But we get, Tom will be hopefully both fight here soon, and then we'll be ramping up with him.
I want to talk about the past year in fight. Like you said, you talked about Calvin, Rob, and Tom, but obviously Rob was the most recent winner. So I'd like to touch on him first. As a coach, how do you assess his performance? I mean, as a fan, I thought it was remarkable. Looked composed against a guy very dangerous, but as a coach, how do you assess it?
Yeah, I mean, as a fan, you're going to be like, "Oh, that was a masterpiece. That was a perfect execution." And that's what you're supposed to do. You just see someone dominate. But as a coach, it's our job to be picky and almost like be hypercritical and look at things, the couple things that he did wrong and think, oh, okay, how can we make sure that that doesn't happen next time, Because there's no performance that's ever going to be perfect, unless you walk out there with a one punch, knock him out, and you can't argue with that, the Masvidal over aspirin type thing. But, it's just our job to go down, break down the 25 minutes of film and think like of a couple of things that we did go wrong and figure out why they went wrong and try to make sure that doesn't happen again in the next fight. Because, you only get to make so many mistakes in fights before it potentially cost you. And, it's our job as coaches to make sure that we're trying to mitigate them happening in the future. But I mean, without being critical, just putting my friend and fan hat on, man, that was amazing. I'm just super proud of Rob. I think he took all the lessons that he learned in his prior losses in the UFC and showcased that he's learned from them. The first loss against Lineker, he got a little overwhelmed by the bright lights and in the moment, and that didn't clearly happen this time. Main event, bright lights, and former champion Cody Garbrandt, and he handled it like a champ. The media was a big deal, and he performed. And then you look at the Pedro Munoz fight where he he was doing really well and then just lost focus for a minute. And we talked about that after as a team, and he lost focus for a little bit, and then it cost him. He got clipped, and then next thing he's getting choked out. And since then we've been preaching this, like, listen, you get a 25 minutes or 15 minutes of focus, and all these guys are dangerous. And I think he showed that in this fight. It was 25 minutes of him being like hyper vigilant, super, super, disciplined and following the game plan and not making mistakes, like resisting that urge to rush in when you think you might be able to knock him out with one more. But at the same time, he's pretty dangerous in that spot. And let's pull back, reset, and go through our progressions. And then look at the last loss, the Assunção lost, and he was able to take Rob down and kind of neutralize him a little bit. Rob didn't have really the answers to get back up, and I remember after that fight, he was like, I really shore up my wrestling. And since then, he's been wrestling up in Maine a few days a week with John Dupree and his team. And Rob, if you look at the Rice fight, and even this fight, if he gets taken down, he get back up. Obviously, we'd like to see it where he just defends the takedown the first time, but this is us being picky as coaches, and hopefully next time, there is no first takedown. It's just we defend the first shot. But yeah, I mean, I think he looked at those three losses and then the big holes that were present in those losses, and you look at how he executed in this fight, and all those things were shored up. Those holes in the boat were filled, and it didn't cost him a loss this time. So I'm super proud of him as a friend and as a fan, and I'm also very proud as a coach that just to see how far he's come and finally get that moment. Main event, UFC, walkout second, being on the poster, all those bucket list things that these young amateur fighters now like dream of doing one day. He got to do.
Yeah, it was remarkable, and I think the way he handled himself during fight week as well as after, like just composed, like just seemed so calm, like he was ready for it. I feel like the mental game is just as important as the physical. What do you do as a coach to kind of help him prep for that? Like you said, first main event, obviously something Calvin's experienced as well, so I'm sure he had some input there. But how do you get these guys to kind of like, just enjoy it and don't let it get to your head, like you said the first time?
Yeah, I think him being able to go to Calvin's main events and see the media, be part of the media, see the whole process, get to walk through the whole, gauntlet of media and that extra, you do a longer walk when you're main event. Calvin's done it both in the blue corner and the red corner. So he just got to be part of that whole ride, and see how Calvin handled it. And you realize like, it's not different. It's just a little bit more. It's just a little extra of the same thing. And, um, 2 extra rounds if you need them. And but other than that, like you realize like, oh, it's just the same thing. It's just another fight. And, just in terms of just getting the guys not to feel overwhelmed by that, you just try to remind them, it's, if this guy came into the gym on a Saturday to spar 5 5s with you, what would you do to him? But now let's go do that. And, you just try to kind of bring it home and, you know, this isn't life or death. This is a sport. This is, obviously it's their livelihood, but at the end of the day, like we started doing this for fun and it still is fun. So I think sometimes you can overthink it. And I think Rob had a big epiphany before the Moraes fight where he was really kind of overthinking, what was on the other side of a win, what was on the other side of a loss, and like putting that pressure on himself. And then he kind of, he's been doing a lot of like internal thinking and, doing a lot of reading and listening to, podcasts and stuff. And he came to the realization that like, listen, I got to stop putting so much pressure on myself. And, and that comes from somewhere internal. That wasn't us asking him to do that. That's him, like as a man and an athlete figuring out like, okay, like I'm feeling certain things. Let me try this. And it's clearly had a profound effect on the way he's performing, because he's going out against these two of the scariest strikers in the division, and he's like kind of walking through them. So, yeah, props to him for that. But overall, I really do think the experience of getting to shadow Calvin over the last year when he had his injury has definitely had a positive impact on Rob.
He said that he took that time to read books and whatnot. I do know that he had some injuries and some layoffs. He only fought Ricky Simone. That's the only fight he had before these two previous ones in the span of 2 years. Like that's not a whole lot for an athlete. Do you think that time off really kind of benefited him? Like I know a lot of fighters want to stay active, but do you think a forced layoff benefited someone like Rob?
Yeah, I think he kind of said it in the pre-fight media interviews. He was saying like that forced time off, like the injury. We had 1 year that was an injury, and another year that we were just a healthy scratch. We had a couple fights fall out on on fight week, then other people not accepting fights or whatever, and a longer delay, and we ended up only fighting once in I think 2019, and then he hurt the knee. So it was like it was just tough, and he said it forced him to learn to be patient, and patience is a huge virtue in this game. You got to focus on what you can control, and the only things generally we can always control is are we getting better, and are we staying in shape. And he's proven that he's willing to do that. He doesn't always need to have a bout agreement signed to stay ready and be improving. And I think that's one of the small things that sets him apart from a lot of fighters, is that when we don't have a bout agreement, we're still getting better.
And that leads me to this next question. I mean, one of your other fighters, Calvin Kattar, he's kind of going through that same sort of thing where he's taking a layoff here. I understand the reason for it, just mental break from fighting and everything, as well as the fight itself. How do you think how is he handling this layoff? I'm sure Calvin, these guys probably just want to fight, but how is he taking the forced layoff?
I think he's good. I think he really trusts the people around him. we do have his best interests in mind. And could he go to fight right now and be fine? Sure. But, there's no rush. He was just super active for a couple of years, and he was just in camp after camp after camp. He's never resting, like, little lingering injuries. He just never had a chance to like decompress, heal, and just like live life a little bit. And he's still in the gym every day. Like, I think when I say things like that, people are like, oh, Calvin's just he's not in the gym. Calvin trained 2 days on Rob's fight week. He was hitting mitts every day and rolling every day and lifting and then doing his stretching and stuff like that. So Calvin's like, I always say this, like Rob and Calvin, when they're not in camp, they're at like a 6 or a 7. When most fighters, I think, are at like a 2 or a 3. So I feel like right now Calvin's already training more than most people that are in camp. It's just a watered down version for him because he's so, he's such a hard worker. Yeah, he's antsy to get back in there, but there's no rush. We'll still get another fight at the end of this year, and we'll work on some things, because when you go through a fight like he did, like, you got some holes to fill, and we've talked about that as a team and internally, and we have some ideas of what we're going to do to, make sure that doesn't happen again. And that's only going to be better with time. The longer he sits out, the better he'll be when he comes back. And I think it's prudent for us to resist that urge that every fighter has after a loss to be like, oh, I want to get that one back. I want to hurry up and get back in there. And I think that's, it can work out sometimes, but in the long run, like, let's go back to the gym. That was a big spotlight on some things that we need to change. And then when we come back in the fall, like, we should be that much better.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on the fight. I mean, the fight with Max Holloway was one of the best fights we've ever seen. Obviously, people were talking about Max's boxing, but I thought Calvin looked incredible as well in that fight. He's kind of the measuring stick, right? Like, he's the best featherweight of all time. He's one of the best fighters of our generation. How do you kind of take a loss like that and kind of turn it into a positive and said, look, you look good. You just fought the greatest fighter there is. But how do you do that as a coach?
I think, we witnessed greatness that night. I think people are going to talk about that performance. And I think, they'll say Calvin's tough, and that's great to be tough. But, Calvin said right after the fight, doesn't be known for being tough. That's not something you want to be known for. He got to climb that mountain and feel the highest skill that's ever been on display in the featherweight division in a 25-minute, window there. And he got to feel that, and he felt it for 25 minutes. And, Calvin's way of kind of handling it was like, listen, I feel like I didn't fight good. And maybe that's because Max, put his pressure on us and kind of dictated everything. But Calvin left the fight. He didn't feel like he performed to his capabilities, but at the same time, we acknowledge that Max probably performed better than he's ever performed ever. And still, it's like we survived. And there's something to be said for that. And you feel that level, and then you're like, okay, this is where I need to be. And there's a rub there. When you can't go 25 minutes with Max the way he just performed and have everybody still talking about it 6 months later, 5 months later, whatever it is, and not get a rub from that and not feel like, okay, like I felt greatness and like it's going to make me better too. And to be honest, I really think, like, after the Rob Font Cody Garbrandt fight, a lot of people are talking about the Max Holloway fight with Kattar. They're kind of comparing the same things just because the number of significant strikes and the fact that it was 5-4, and it wasn't, I know there's a couple of trolls being like, oh, Cody with COVID and this and that. It's like, no, I don't think you take anything away from Cody in that fight. I think it's just Rob was just so on. So it's interesting for us being on the other side now. I still think Cody's an amazing fighter. I think he's from a great camp. He's got great coaches. It's not well, obviously it is easier, but being on this end when you're on the winning side of it, but you still feel for Cody. You say, like, man, it's like, I don't know if there's much you could have done to beat Rob on Saturday, just because he was just so well put together mentally and physically. And it's just, his whole career kind of culminated into that performance. And I don't know that even if Cody did do X, Y, or Z or zigged when he should have zagged, I don't know how much of a difference it would have made. And so it's just interesting for us as a team to, have Rob sitting through that back in January with Max and getting to witness it, but then him coming out and doing the same thing to someone else, the numbers of significant strikes weren't as much, but people are, a lot of people are drawing comparisons between these fights. And I think, Rob's gonna, I know I'm rambling, but it's just, you see, like, Rob got to witness something that night, and then he just kind of did it to himself. He did it himself to Cody. And I just got to think that, like, now Calvin being on both ends of it, being on the losing end with Matt feeling the greatest that's ever done it, and then seeing Rob kind of do the same thing on the other end and being in the corner for that, I just got to think it's going to have a rub that's going to go and play into Calvin's next fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to talk about one other guy here, Tom Peggs. I mean, a lot of people forget about him. Like you said, I mean, these guys are interchangeable. You can't mention Rob Font without mentioning Calvin, and vice versa. But someone that kind of deserves a little bit of credit here is one of their main training partners, who's, he's got one pro fight, but he'll be here one day. How important is he to helping guys like Rob and Calvin, and what does it mean to have someone like him around?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's sometimes he's a body, sometimes he's the punching bag, because he's a young kid on the team, pays him a little bit. And we kind of, I know I joke around with him a little bit and tell him he's a young buck and try to carry our bags and stuff. He doesn't all fall for it, but when the shit's the fan, so to speak, and he gets a call on 4 days notice to drive to Philadelphia, we all dropped what we're doing and we went with him. We shared beds and slept floors in a hotel room so he could get his rest on night. And I drove overnight on the way home so he could get home, stuff like that. Like, us three are willing to sacrifice just as much for him as he is for us. And that, is kind of one of those things that I think sets our team aside, is that, I'm not just handling the UFC guys. I'm doing the same thing that I would do for them. I'm doing for Tom. And he's only, he wasn't even a pro until his last fight. And Tom, on the flip side, is he's putting in that work just like a top 5 UFC fighter. He's putting the hours, and he's still, he's got a lot to learn still. He's got ways to go, and he's got a lot of mental growing to do, because that's what that sport is. You cut your teeth as a pro, and you learn lessons along the way. And some of those lessons you just can't learn until you get in there and get the fights yourself. But he's benchmarking for sure off of all the lessons that our teams learned from the past. He's benefiting from us executing differently. He's benchmarking off Rob and Calvin, seeing how they train, and saying, "Oh, I can't do that. Rob said not to do it," or Calvin said not to do it, or I like how Calvin does this. And he's figuring out kind of make his own style off of the way our camps run and the way those who train. But I mean, if you're a 1-0 fighter, like, who better at 145? Who better to benchmark than off of Rob Font and Calvin Kattar?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it showed in his performance. I mean, to take that fight on short notice and to get it done late in the fight, really, really showed a lot of character. And he took that on short notice. What went behind that decision? Like, you know what? Like, you're going to accept this fight. It's 4 days out. Pro debut. Like, no one does that. Usually fighters want proper preparation. Lots on the line here. Like, if you don't want to lose your first pro fight, he took the fight and he got it done. What went behind that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I got the call, I think, on a Sunday night for a fight on Friday. And, Tom, the whole pandemic, he didn't have a fight, but he trained. He was in every camp with Rob, or, every camp with Calvin. He was at our house lifting when all the gyms were shut. He was coming in for those sessions that he needed to come in for, He was there for all of them. He was running hills with us. He was doing all those things. He was in camp with them as if he had a fight, and he didn't have a fight. So when the call came, his weight was already low. He was already in shape. We knew he could go 3 hard rounds, and he'd been in the gym. I think the only thing different is maybe we would have done a little, if we knew we had a fight, we would have done some more sparring. But, it's, sometimes I think you can overthink a pro debut, and we know what we have in Tom. We know how skilled he is, and we know what he's capable of. And when they sent us the name, hey, who'd you get for this guy? I was like, oh, Tom would kill this kid. And, we went back, and I think the other kid probably knew it too. Like, they probably didn't want to fight someone like Tom. But, you sell out the place. It's your pro debut. You get a banner made. You get a bunch of T-shirts. Everybody in the stands is your fan. You've been training for 2-3 months. Your opponent pulls out 4 days out. What are you going to do? Send everybody home, or are you going to take a risk? And, those are the choices that you have, and they chose to take the risk, and it was at our benefit. And yeah, I was just so proud of him, and I think he's a glaring example to young fighters that you don't only train when you have a bout agreement. For young fighters, amateur fighters in their first 4 or 5 pro fights, they shouldn't be doing camps. They should this is their life. They should be training year round. And then when you get a fight, it's like, okay, you dial it up a little bit, but like not much should change. It shouldn't be like, hey guys, I can't do this now because I have a fight. I'm in camp. It's like not much should change when you're in camp. This guy lives and breathes fighting. His whole job is to show up and train and keep improving. And then, we set up the people that he's supposed to knock down, and then he keeps, learning from guys like Rob and Calvin and the other coaches. And he proved that. He went in against a pretty tough kid from a good gym, and Sean Brady was in the other corner, and UFC vet there, and he just showed that he's got a bright future, and now we just gotta keep the momentum going.
I'll ask you a couple more. I know I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but every time we catch up, I feel like I may as well make the most of the opportunity. We talked a little bit about the three of them, and I think one thing that separates the New England Cartel from most other gyms is the fact that they are tight-knit. Like I said, you can't really mention Rob Font without mentioning Calvin Kattar, without mentioning Tom, without mentioning you. How important is that unity between not just the four of you, but anybody who walks in with you guys? How important is it, and what's it like to be so close with, I guess, not just your friends, but your business partners, your athletes? It's got to be unique, and what's it like to have those guys be so close to one another?
I mean, it's not on accident. They say you are who you surround yourself with, and so that would mean that I'm Rob, Tom, and Calvin, right? And vice versa. So, a few years ago when we split off, we kind of did our own thing. We had this vision of how things could be done, and I had some ideas that were at the time probably controversial, and I felt like, listen, we don't need all these people in the room. We need less people. We need more attention to the fighter. We need the schedules built around the fighter's schedule, not the fighter schedule built around the gym schedule or the coach's schedule. I think you need to have people around you dedicated to your career, that their job is 100% just to make fighters better. You can't have some of these part-time coaches, these guys that coach on the side. You got to have the best coaches. You got to have the best training partners, and you got to have only people in the room who are going to add value. No people that are just taking away your time, asking stupid questions, like holding the team back. I really feel like these guys deserve that, and they bought into it, and I think the results are speaking for themselves, fortunately, because we all did take a risk in that. No one had ever called me a head coach before, and Rob believed in me, and we've had some success since then, and then we got Calvin and Tom are there too, and we have a lot of other people that are trying to train with us, and we just we're keeping the group really small. It's just not a lot of people who are gonna mesh with us the way that we mesh with each other. So anybody who gets in on the team, it's gonna be because they passed all the sniff tests and they passed all the hard work tests and all that stuff, and it's gonna be someone who we think that we believe in. We see their work ethic. We like them as people, and then and that we buy into their vision, and they buy into ours, and they're gonna make us better. We're gonna make them better. But I just don't see how you do it any other way. I don't see how you can go into. Obviously, it works, but I just don't feel comfortable like coaching 50 guys. It's like, yeah, I can be a coach and be cornering every weekend at a UFC, but it's like, when am I coaching you? At that point, I'm just a professional corner, maybe 1 day a week, and I'm with these guys 6 days a week, sometimes 2 sessions a day. So it's yeah, it's just like there's different ways to skin a cat, and this is the way that I thought would be. I just thought that they deserved, like I know when I was fighting, what I had and what I didn't have. And I always thought like, it'd be nice if we had X, Y, and Z. And then I got to the position where I was able to implement X, Y, and Z for other people that, were not only my friends, but were excellent fighters and that I believed in. And fortunately, it's been working.
And then I'll ask you one last question before I let you go. I know a friend of yours and also like a friendly rival is Eric Nixick. And after Francis Ngannou won his belt. He kind of paid like respect to Eric's son. How important is it to you that your family is behind this? Because I can't imagine it's easy for your kids to be okay with you traveling to the other side of the world, or getting in a car on 4 days notice and driving across to Pennsylvania. I mean, how important is it to have that support back home?
Yeah, it's everything. We always say the captains of the cartel are my wife, Rob's girl, and Calvin's mom. So, and then you got Savannah and Tom's girl. It's like they're without them, none of this is able to happen. If I have a wife at home that's nagging me to like, oh, do you really have to go? Like, we just went out a week early for Rob's fight. She didn't question it. She's like, all right, go do your thing. Like, go get a win. Whereas I think some wives that aren't as supportive would be like, you really have to go? You're going to miss the kids for 2 weeks. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to be away from the kids for 2 weeks, but I also want to win this fight. And, there's not much I won't do for the guys. I think it's going to help them win. And it is what I'm passionate about. And, it takes a supportive partner. Fortunately, I have Sarah that does all that. And the kids, they miss me. They stay clingy for a few days and I get back. My daughter's only 1.5, so she doesn't quite understand yet. But FaceTime's I don't know how to do it if we didn't have FaceTime and the video and stuff like that. But yeah, the kids are getting old enough now where they get excited about fights. I have a 5-year-old and he's like, Uncle Calvin's gonna win or Uncle Rob's gonna win, and they want to be fighters when they get older, and they call him Uncle Calvin, Uncle Rob, and so it's cool. And then they get to see their dad on TV, and that's exciting. But yeah, I thought that was a cool moment when I saw Ngannou mention Eric's son, and then his wife recorded it, and that was cool as a dad to see that.
Yeah, tear wrenching. I started tearing up a little bit. I don't have kids, but I was like, oh wow, like. But man, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thanks again for the time. I appreciate it. I know how busy you are. Front runner for Coach of the Year too. I know that's probably not an accolade that means as much as a win, but you're my front runner for Coach of the Year, and I can't wait to see what the rest of 2021 has in store.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.